Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Heritage Board meeting, Thursday, November 16th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have any declarations of conflicts today? Seeing none, can I have an approval of the agenda? Okay, moved by, okay, and seconded by Lucas. All right. Can I have an adoption of the minutes that are in your package from September the 25th? Okay, moved by Counselor Beck. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, we don't have anyone online, do we?
John.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I didn't know he was there.
Asked if she can hear you. She wasn't there.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I am, Deputy. Good
Okay,
evening.
thank you. All right, any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none, we have just one item on our agenda today, and that's 10 Prince Street. And I assume everybody had an opportunity to read the report that was in our package. And I'll turn this over to Todd. Thank you.
So Planning and Heritage Department is initiating the designation of 10 Prince Street by including it on the inventory of designated heritage resources. The city received an application for development, which would include the removal or demolition of the existing building. The building's not a designated heritage resource, and it's not protected under the Heritage Preservation Bylaw. City Council supported Heritage Board's recommendation to place a 45-day temporary designation on the building on October 10th. The temporary designation is set to expire on November 24th. The property is on the corner of Prince and Water Streets in the downtown mixed-use neighborhood zone. It's been occupied as a single-family residence until at least the 1950s, but from 1976 to the present, it's been occupied by various commercial businesses. It's a simple Victorian style with a gable L configuration that supports both streetscapes and the heritage character of the area. Records do not reveal the exact age of the house, but its style is consistent with that of a typical home built around 1900. The building appears to be in reasonable condition and fits the scale of the area. It's simple in form, addresses the corner, and has a traditional gable end facade. It's not an elaborate architectural style of the period, but instead speaks to a simple single-family residence. It has some unique characteristics, such as the scalloped shingles at the course line and in the gable. It has a stained glass window and a side veranda. The earliest records of ownership of this site were located through a search of land conveyances, directories, and other historical records. We can't determine when the first house at 10 Prince Street was constructed, but surveyor John Ball lived in a house on the corner of Prince and Water Streets, according to Hutchinson's 1864 Prince Edward Island directory. Land records indicate that he had leased the land from Mary Williams Lewis in 1854, and in 1873, he and his father, surveyor John Ball, owned the lot. A newspaper indicates that John Ball was renting out a house, a coach house, and a garden on the corner of Prince and Water Streets in 1879. This is a picture of the 1888 Meacham's Atlas. We also have a record of later land conveyances tracing ownership from 1854 to the current day. The 1878 panoramic view shows what appears to be the same original house as on the Meacham's 1880 map. This house is smaller than the existing house, and unless the house was renovated and added to, it appears that the current building was constructed later than 1878. 1.5-story wood frame dwelling appears on the Gold Fire Insurance map of 1903, which is updated to 1917. It has a similar footprint and location as the existing building. indicating that the current building probably dates to at least pre-1917. So the city has an application for development, which would include the removal and demolition of the existing building. The new structure is subject to the zoning and development bylaw and would require an independent architectural review under the design review process. It's a 4-story building with a commercial unit on the ground floor, a residential unit on the second floor, and a second residential unit occupying the upper 2 floors. The proposed new development does not fall within the scope of the Heritage Board. So Section 3.7 of the official plan, capitalizing on heritage resources, recognizes and supports the protection of heritage resources as among the community's most valuable assets. And it states that it's crucial that a significant portion of the building stock be retained. It clearly sets out the objective is to protect, restore, respect, and leverage all heritage resources. The policy recognizes that the 500-lot area is comprised of an extraordinary concentration of significant heritage buildings, landmarks, and streetscapes, which need to be protected and restored as they create a sense of place and are the city's lifeblood. Policy also recognizes heritage attributes in order to enable adequate and appropriate protection of the heritage resources. So, from 1980 to 2013, this property would have been included in the original heritage area downtown. From 2013 to 2018 is when we brought in the 500-lot provisions. At that time, any demolition in the 500-lot area needed to be approved by Heritage Board. Following 2018, when the 2 bylaws were split into the Heritage Preservation Bylaw and the Zoning and Development Bylaw, the official plan states that any demolition permit in the 500-lot area has to first have a heritage assessment. So the Preservation Bylaw identifies criteria to be taken into consideration for a proposed designation. These are included in the building evaluation. An updated evaluation was undertaken this month, which has resulted in a score of 68 versus the 2007 score of 63. The difference is attributed to an additional 5 points for landmark status, the criteria of which is that it is a conspicuous and familiar in the context of the immediate community, neighborhood, or local district. It also includes an increase of 2 points for historical context, given one owner's association with their own sail-making business and 2 other owners who were blacksmiths for the railway. The exterior condition was reduced by 2 points, given minor general deterioration. This also coincides with an independent consultant's evaluation. The report and the consultant's report in the package give greater detail on all 12 subcategories of consideration. Sometime in the 70s and at least through the 80s, the building was covered in aluminum siding, and by the late 80s, it required some refurbishment. This 1970s photo shows the building in a state of different exterior cladding. The building restoration was taken on by the property owner in 1990, David McCabe. The inappropriate siding was removed, wood shingle siding was restored, and the stained glass windows were refurbished, reclaiming the lost architectural details. David was awarded a PEI Museum and Heritage Foundation Heritage Award in 1991 for his efforts. The citation reads in part that his work is an example for Lower Prince Street. Following the temporary designation of 10 Prince Street on October 10th, 6 written responses were received by the city. 5 were in favor of designating the property as a heritage resource, and we had 1 anonymous response which was not in favor of it being designated. An online petition initiated by a member of the public garnered 610 signatures in favor of designating the property. A request to designate the Prince Street streetscape from Water Street to King Street on both the east and west sides has been submitted by property owners on the block. It's understood that 6 of the 8 property owners of the affected properties are in favor of the streetscape designation. The streetscape proposal provides historical background on the affected properties and the significance in defining the special character of this part of the downtown. Brighter Community Planning and Consulting was engaged to provide an independent heritage assessment of 10 Prince Street. Their assessment resulted in a positive recommendation to designate this property. The full report is available in the package. They deemed that it was to be an important and significant heritage resource whose demolition or removal would result in damage to the streetscape. It would create a gap in the streetscape. Loss of the resource would damage the integrity and authenticity of the streetscape in the 500 lot area, reducing the historical prominence of the corner as well. The heritage building evaluation criteria was applied by the consultant and yielded a score also of 68, which is a grade 2 classification, resulting in the property being eligible for heritage resource designation. Therefore, they are recommending it positively for designation as a resource. So in summary, the home is believed to have been built around 1900. The residential late Victorian plain style is typical of the building stock of the era in the downtown. It exhibits some unique characteristics such as scallop shingle patterning, stained glass windows, and the side veranda. These are standardized design components applied with attentive craftsmanship. It frames the view towards the water from the more northern end of Prince Street. Likewise, for the primarily pedestrian traffic moving from the cruise ship wharves, it sets the tone and makes a first impression on the character of the downtown neighborhood. The intersection serves to slow both pedestrian and vehicular traffic. It's this point which identifies the entry and exit of the downtown core. The building is an important architectural asset contributing to the heritage character of the surrounding area. The house retains its modified L plan with appropriately designed minimal changes. It exhibits a moderately high level of architectural integrity with respect to condition. Built of light frame construction with an L-shaped floor plan, it's built atop a masonry foundation. The outside walls are clad in a combination of plain wood shingles and scallop wood shingles. The roof is clad in metal shingles. This construction type was common during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Major elements such as the gable roof, the veranda, and stained glass window remained intact, unmodified, and in very good condition. With the ongoing transformation of the waterfront in the eastern end of the downtown, the corner of Prince Street and Water Street has gained significance. The intersection marks a transition from a faster-paced vehicular traffic to a narrower and slower-moving section of Water Street to the west. As a result, the property at 10 Prince Street has become a notable structure, signaling what is to be found beyond. Given one owner was a sail-making business and 2 others were blacksmiths. They were both major industries. The building has little known connection with significant person, institution, or event. John Ball, surveyor, Mrs. Robert McLaren, Michael Hines, Tony Hansen were all previous owners. So the staff's recommending that the 10 Prince Street be included on the inventory of designated heritage resources. Thanks.
Thank you for that report, Todd. And I noticed in the report that you have it at the very bottom, too, that not only that, but you have the Planning and Heritage Department recommend that 10 Prince Street be designated as a heritage resource under the Heritage Preservation Bylaw. So does this have to go to council as well?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right. So, any questions? Really? The only thing I might ask Todd, and it was 2018 when this bylaw came into effect, is that correct? And when was this property purchased by the existing owner?
Yeah, it was purchased 2014? Between 2013 and 2018, you had to get approval through Heritage Board for a demolition permit.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I just, I think the report was very well presented and very well documented, and I think the decision to look at the temporary 45-day designation served its purpose in this instance. And I think the information was well documented, well presented, and I'll certainly be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Todd, what are the next steps if this goes on to council and everyone accepts the staff's recommendation? What are the next steps for Heritage to even go to? How then is it now just happen? Is it become, or is there more of a process?
Yeah, the process essentially starts over again. We would notify the applicant. It actually has 120 days unless we move faster, where they can't really do anything. They're given an opportunity for public. It goes back in the paper. It goes on the website. Public's given an opportunity to comment. The owner and applicant are given an opportunity to comment. If there's any opposition, then it comes back to Heritage Board for another review. If there's no opposition, it can go straight to council where they can make a decision. If it comes back to Heritage Board, they'd make a recommendation to council before a final decision's made.
So what we're doing today, we're going to be doing it all over again. Is that what you mean? So today, if we accept your recommendation to go to council, and if council then accepts the recommendation from the planning of the Heritage staff, then we go through that process that you just outlined again?
We would go through that process. It would only come back if there's opposition. It would only come back to Heritage Board if there is opposition to the designation.
Oh.
And we would review that opposition, and then it would go back to council.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, yep, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Counselor.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Deputy. So I just need a little bit more clarification, because when we first looked at doing this, I understood that when the property owner purchased this property, there was no designation, and he was buying a property that wasn't going to meet this. And I understood we could come in and do it at any time. But can you clarify for me then, because that was why I voted not to have a designation placed for 45 days. I just figured if he came in and he had put all his ducks in a row and done things right, and we were coming in then looking for a designation. Can you explain to me again, I know I asked you that he had purchased the property and what the difference when the change happened, just so it can be on public record, basically?
Sure. So 1980, the city first brought in heritage provisions. They designated a number of properties, and there was also a small heritage area in the downtown. It included everything to Water Street, both sides of Prince Street. So this property was included in the original heritage area. That was in place until 2013, when they essentially expanded the whole heritage area to include the whole 500 lot area. So it remained in a protected area, if you will, and that was in place until 2018. In 2018, they pulled the 500 lot area out as a heritage area and made it a special planning area with special development rules within the zoning and development bylaw. And they made a separate heritage bylaw. So since 2018, any demolition permit in the downtown requires a heritage review before it's issued.
So a sign-off. You need to sign off to say that, and that's why we ended up where we are today.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Any other questions? Yes.
If I may, just
Yes.
in the process, because this is the first time I've ever seen this happen before, but, so it goes to council. If council agrees to it, it goes to public meeting. A public meeting, if there's opposition, then it comes back to Heritage to deal with it before it goes back to council, just like a rezoning, or, is that wrong?
Yeah, there is no public meeting. It's posted on the website, in the paper, to the applicant, and an opportunity is given for comments. Those are then gathered, and if there's a comment that's given that's opposing, then it comes back to Heritage Board before going to council.
That makes sense. Okay, so it's a mail out or it's published. It's not a public meeting. I understand. I can speak for the owner. He is without a doubt going to, appeal it or give his opinion strongly against for all the obvious reasons that have been discussed to date. I think it's more about the process. I understand it's in the bylaw that this can be done, but he did do everything right, including a submission for design review, put the money invested into the work that we prepared, whether it required further modification through the design review process, that's fine, but only there did it trigger this discussion about possible demolition, where it landed in your court. So it came as a huge surprise to everybody on this side, and I'm speaking for the owner. So he will, without a doubt, put forward some sort of opposition letter so council can review that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Can I get the speaker's name and on the record, just, you never really said who it was.
Apologies. Robert Haggis of Sable Arc Studios.
The system has detected that a few lines are still connected to the conference and will attempt to disconnect them. If you wish to remain in the conference, please press star 1. 15.
Welcome to 1986. Okay, any other, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting, I think it's something that the city planning, heritage, everyone is going to have to really grapple with, because this becomes an avenue to stop any development potentially. And I'm not saying, like, when I look at, like, I'm putting on a hat as an architect, obviously, but I do think that we're looking for density, we're looking for growth, we're looking for affordability. All these pressures are happening to our downtown core. And I think I just need to make a comment that I think the city is really going to have some long, hard discussions with the public about what we want in the downtown, because you can't preserve two-story houses and have density in a core. I think it becomes a very difficult thing to do, and it's a balance. I think there are strong attributes to this property. I'm not saying that, but I think there's going to be a lot of kind of hard conversations to have about what we want our city to look like. And I think this is kind of a culmination of all of those things, because although it's rating reasonably high, I would agree in terms of its score, it wouldn't be a stellar kind of house that we would all stand up and say, absolutely, we've got to preserve it. But we need to balance that with density and development in the city and the downtown. It's not an easy one. I actually think the separation of the heritage and the 500 lot bylaw, unfortunately, I think it took us backwards a little bit, because it used to be, if you had to demo a building, there was a requirement that heritage had to review what was being built that went with it. As part of that understanding, like, maybe it's valid to take down a building if what's being put back is of decent quality, meets the requirements, still makes a good building in the city. And I think the separation of those two is really unfortunate, to be quite honest with you. So I'll leave it at that. I know that's outside of our jurisdiction right now, because that's no longer in the realm of the Heritage Board. But I think it's unfortunate, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, and as the chair, I think I will ensure that we have this added to an agenda item for our Planning and Heritage Committee, And when we're back looking at our official plan, which will then prompt the changes to the zoning and development bylaw, it's probably a difficult conversation we'll have to have at that time. So thank you for that. Yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I do want to concur with the general point that Aaron's making, in that we do have to decide what it is that we want our city to look like. And that will come out, hopefully through public consultation, that it will be coming in as we're looking at our official plan, which will be kicking up here again. And that's really the ultimate question, is what do we want our city to look like? And those are important questions. And I hope people put thought into that. And I hope people who want to have their voice heard take the time to participate in those public consultations, because I think it's an important question. And can't just be 8 or 10 people sitting around a table who are making that decision for 43,000 people. So the avenues are there. charlottetownhall.ca, official plan, public consultations. So, but ultimately, that's the question that we'll have to ask ourselves: is what type of city do we want? What type of development do we want to have? That's a great question. Hopefully, we figure it out soon.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Are there any other questions? So we have a recommendation from staff to support the going forward with this being a permanent heritage designation. So we need yeah, go ahead.
Don't mean to sound like a broken record, but to your point, Norman, I think that this idea of designating and forcing a designation on a property that, I mean, it's a fairly subjective thing. I see that it's risen 5 points. It's a 68 out of 100. That was the basis and part of the decision for this purchaser to buy this property, based on the fact that it had a low score of 63. That was his metric, whether right or wrong, in discussions with the city to move forward with the purchase, to move forward with the concept of demolition and putting something in its place. So what I just want to bring up is this is a bit of a precedent. So when you decide to do this, that puts everybody on notice in the Lot 500 area that their property could be designated tomorrow because this group decided it was important to do so. And I think that's a good idea. I'm all about preservation. I don't, it's more of a sustainable idea to preserve a building and reuse it. That's not what the client wants to do here. But to proactively go out, if you could think about the properties in downtown that you think this house, again, in my opinion, it's beautiful in its simplicity, but it's all over the place. It just holds a corner. Everybody can close their eyes. They can see Water Street and they can see that house. But if you think about all the other properties that have a higher value right now that aren't designated, those are the ones that should be approached proactively versus somebody coming forward with an application for a design that is as of right, and only then to figure out that, well, wait a second, Heritage feels that it's a nice property and it should be preserved. So this puts everybody on notice downtown. If they wish to do something, that they had plans in the back of their head, those might get denied because the Heritage Board feels it should be designated.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think for sure this will need to be added to our next Planning and Heritage Committee meeting to look at. I mean, I know Councilor McCabe had talked about, putting together, there should be a list, and I remember it was a new database of what could potentially fall into the same criteria. And I see that Laurel Palmer Thompson would like to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to this. I mean, I understand your client purchased the property with the assumption that he could rebuild on that lot, but this is the 500 lot area. There's a master plan in place. There is nothing in that master plan that says that people have the right to just, as of right, demolish, and that's why there are regulations in place that the Heritage Board has to review prior to a demolition. as Todd said, this is also, it's not just based on the building in itself, it's its prominence on the streetscape. So, I mean, we're looking at a number of things. To Aaron's point, yes, we are looking for density within the city, but we have to look for appropriate places to place that density. And with the official plan review, we're looking at areas within the city, nodes, that density is appropriate. We also have to look at what's important in our downtown. And the 500 lot area, there are areas within the 500 lot area that we have designated for higher density, and that's the downtown core. And along the waterfront, we did allow buildings to go to 8 stories under form-based code. So there are areas that more density is appropriate. So we didn't completely wipe out the thought of having density within the downtown core, the 500 lot area. But I think we also have to keep in our minds and be mindful of the fact that if we continuously erode the 500 lot area and allow properties to be just demolished one by one by one, then we're not going to have the 500 lot area. So when we come to the time, when we do this official plan review and we're looking at the 500 lot area, yes, we have to decide what our city is going to look like. And that is the big question. Do you want to erode the 500 lot area, or do you want to keep that integrity somewhat? Because there's many ways that you're going to erode it. Could be through consolidation of lots and demolitions, allowing different types of buildings. I'm not opposed to density within the downtown, but it has to be in appropriate places.
Thank you, Laurel. Go ahead,
Thanks,
Mr.
Laurel.
Haggis.
And this specific property is part of that form-based code. So for example, if the lot frontage was large enough, it could potentially go to 8 stories, subject to bonus density approval. And 6 stories, sorry, 6 stories. But so I understand all of that. I appreciate it. I think we're being a little short-sighted with using this specific property as the first one to force designation. That's my opinion. And it is about the process. If this property was felt by the Heritage Board was important, then at that point, the planning board should have told the applicant, don't bother designing anything before we determine if this property is important or not. Because that wasn't the message. In order to decide if it was to be demolished, a design had to be prepared, but only when that was completed through, I guess, over 5-6 months, did it then trigger this going to Heritage. We had no idea until within a day that it arrived on the doorsteps of this board. We were waiting for comment from the Heritage Department, received none. We just found out that this was going for this first time ever forced designation or temporary designation. Sorry, go ahead.
We're tag teaming again. But we did have this conversation. You did come into my office with the plans, the prepared design, preliminary design, and at that time I did indicate that I had concerns over the bulk, the mass, and the scale of the building and its prominence on the corner, and I advised that it would have to go to Heritage Board for review for the demolition, and that it would be probably appropriate to scale the building back prior to going to Heritage Board, or prior to going to design review, because I felt that the building was
Bigger than it should be.
bigger than it should be. So we were waiting for a more scaled back design. But to the point of 6 stories, the bylaw does allow for 6 stories, but people are confusing that. It's not that you can just go in and build 6 stories. There's conditions upon that. 6 stories is to bonus height, so you have to provide public benefit. It also depends on the bulk and the mass of the scale of the buildings along the streetscape. So I'm also dealing with another applicant that's put their application through for design review for a 4-story building next to 2 buildings that were 1.5 to 2 stories. Well, it was at a scale. So we've asked that architect to scale the building back. So it has to fit within the context of the street. If you have higher buildings on the street and 6 stories or 5 stories is appropriate, then yes, you can build to that bulk and mass and scale. But it's just not 6 stories as long as you provide public benefit. There's design mechanisms that have to be put in place in order to make that new building fit into the streetscape.
Thank you, Laurel. And I think we're kind of getting off track of what we're here today as the Heritage Board, and that is to either accept or not the department's recommendation that 10 Prince Street be designated as a heritage resource under the Heritage Preservation Bylaw. And so if there's no other questions from the board, can I have does somebody want to move this resolution? Okay, moved by Councillor Beck. Okay, great. So we have a resolution on the floor. Do we have any questions on the resolution? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Simon seconded it. Yeah. Yeah. So no questions on the resolution. So all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Are they still online? Didn't we have somebody online?
Done.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Listen.
Yeah, she's just listening, okay. All right, so that will move on to council. And do I have any new business? No new business? Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Beck and seconded by Lucas. All those in favor? Great. Good night, folks.